where are you now?
Tyson, I'm in my studio in the Southern Highlands in New South Wales. And I can see you're down in Melbourne, well, probably where I should be. One of the intentions for the exhibitions I've been making for a few years now is that when audiences enter the exhibition space, they encounter a number of things on different levels. And this relates to the way I'm thinking about the land space, in that you have these multi-layered, kind of very complex and intricate understandings of how things work together. So in a way, it's almost like an unfolding story.
Yeah. Well, I think you're more explicitly bringing time into space and place here, time into the land space as a variable for this exhibition, you know?
Yeah, the sun also sets is quite a symbolic way of beginning to talk about a particular period in history, which was, catastrophic and tumultuous change in that late colonial period, but also how people began to image that and picture that in different ways, and the kind of almost mythology that was built up around spaces, and how people began to negotiate a particular kind of cultural space as well.
Most of our Aboriginal languages, there's no separate word for time and place, it's one concept. And I see this coming through quite strongly. So there's those smaller cycles of seasonal time, but then I'm also seeing, picking up a sense of deep time in this. So the Hemingway stuff, and the Ecclesiastes, particularly Ecclesiastes with that sun rises, the sun sets, and this is just a blip in time.
In relation to storytelling and the narration of Aboriginal culture, there is a kind of a long view. There is almost a quantum view. And because of that, almost that collapse of time and space, I find that in many ways, when you begin talking about histories, it's not about something necessarily that is past, although in terms of our time it is. It begins to open up into a conversation or a dialogue around landscape.
The places you photograph are very young places in a dreaming kind of worldview. It's only 10,000 years old, the landscape you're looking at, because of volcanic eruptions, and the rainforest there is very new. And so creation there is still, it hasn't settled yet. It's still in a really dynamic state of flux.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because even though it's comparatively recent in terms of that geological time span or dreaming time span, there's still a sense, as you say, of an evolution going on, and almost it's a land space feeling its way.
Danny, here's a little quantum seasonal shot of the place where your paintings are going. I thought you might like this.
I like that very much.
As we've spoken before about your work, particularly the infrared stuff and the special story places where you go, there's a really big snake story there, and I think a lot of your lens is a snake eye lens, even carpet snake specifically.
And this is a postcard from Wingana, Lake Eacham, up in the Atherton Tablelands. This is from up back that way.
Story place. There it is.
Nice one.
Yeah. Oh, terrible place. That's lovely. It feels like the end of the world somehow looking at this picture, but I guess that's what we're looking at.
That interest in photography and historical photography comes about for me as a result of my engagement with the family archive, and that's photographs of my Aboriginal family that go back to the very early 20th century, and they were taken over 4 generations of my family by the same photographer, Alfred Atkinson. And so there's a particular relationship I have with understanding and reading those archival pictures, but also having them talked about as well within family. So there's a living connection in that sense, to an object which is connected to that particular time and space.
Always with your works, they're not discrete pieces. You know, they're always linked together. I mean, so they're linked together with a dreaming that I can see, but then you're also usually telling a story somehow, and you use a lot of different devices within the works, and you kind of link different pieces together in an inductive sequence almost.
The painting that I actually began working on for the exhibition as the first work was The End of Certainty, which is the campsite with the midges. And I wanted to imply something that was almost like an abandoned space, or something that was falling into disrepair because it wasn't being used in the way that it was supposed to be. It talks about that, the end of surety for, if you like, cultural continuation or Aboriginal people in that landscape. It goes back to that feeling of melancholy, which I was drawing on quite a lot in this exhibition. The sun also sets kind of is a precursor to, yes, the night comes and then the sun also rises. But in a way, we're talking about monumental change. So that sensuous surface that I work with, the iridescence on imagery that's painted, it hopefully gives a sense of another worldly kind of quality, another worldly experience. There's a depth to the experience because there are layers of history, there are layers of culture, and there are people who are present.